scatter chart. And as for the relationship, well, orbit increases as the distance increases, so they both increase together. So let me go and the next set of data like that. And let's see what I need to do here. Well, I need to take the data. I need to go to Insert, bring up a scatter chart for it, like so. And then I need to change the axes bounds. So I click on the horizontal one first, and under the axis options, I'll change the maximum bound there to be 700, like that. And I'll do the same thing for the vertical axis. So the bound for that one needs to be 700, like so. So when I change those then, we can see that we now only get 4 points appearing on the chart like that. And we can see that they're forming a pattern, aren't they, where they are going up together. So what that tells us, that as the distance from the sun increases, then the orbit increases as well. Right, let me minimize the exercises. And I think at this point we will move on to the next section and look at some of the less common types of chart that you may see on your travels. By and large, you may find that this is because these are charts that only became available in later versions of Excel, typically Excel 2016. So if you're looking for these in earlier versions of Excel, I'm very sorry, but they're not going to be available to you. But anyway, let us move on. First of all, we have got some data here where we first of all got a category column that contains drink and food. We've then got items of cola, coffee, pizza, soup and salad. And we've then got a sales column giving us the amounts. Now, we've got data organised in somewhat of a hierarchy here, haven't we? Where we have got cola and coffee belonging to drink, and pizza, soup and salad belonging to food. Now, if you have got data in the hierarchy that you want to display, we've got a few different charts that we can use. First of all, if I go and select my data and go to Insert, and then open up this section here that looks a little bit like a piece of modern art, the hierarchy section. In there, we have got the tree map that looks like this. So for this one, we can see that we've got different colours there for drink and for food, and we've also got blocks for each one of the items. And the size of the blocks will relate to the amount of the sales. So that's one type of chart you can use. So let me just shrink that a bit and move that there. The other option that we have is if I go back into Insert and open that up again, that's better. And if I go to the hierarchy section again and choose Sunburst, we get this. So in a sense, it looks a little bit like a pie chart, doesn't it? Except that, I've lost control of my mousing. Let me put that back. There we go, that's looking a bit better. Right, as I was. Right, the Sunburst chart, think of it as being a little bit like a pie chart, except you've got a series of concentric rings showing you the different values. We've got this inner ring here showing us food and drink, and then on the outside we have got the items themselves, and that shows us that cola and coffee belong under drink. In general, using a Sunburst is probably preferable because you can have multiple concentric rings giving you information. But just bear in mind that the more concentric rings you have, your chart perhaps becomes a little bit less readable. Now, there is one other option that is available to you if you are familiar with pivot tables. In the Q&A, Someone was asking me about what the difference is between a chart and a pivot chart. And this is really where I think it's worth just taking a quick look at it. A pivot chart is a chart that's based on a pivot table. And it actually works really well if you want to display hierarchical data on a chart. Now, what I'm going to do is build up a quick pivot table for this data. I'm going to assume that you already know how to use pivot tables. If you don't, I suggest going on the Foundations course and then maybe coming back and reviewing this section. But anyway, what I'll do is select the data. I'll create a quick pivot table that I will put right here underneath my main chart, like so. And I'm going to get my pivot table to display category and item for my rows and a sales value for my values, like so. So down here we've got our pivot table. Now, if you want to display this on a chart, what you can do is go up to your Analyze menu and then choose the pivot chart option, like so. So that will show you that data on your chart. We can see that we've got a section here for drink that contains coffee and cola, and a section that contains a pizza, salad and soup within food. The beauty of a pivot chart is that when you change your pivot table, it gets updated in the chart as well. So that's a very, very brief look at pivot charts. It's probably best if you just have a play around with those in your own time, if you're familiar with pivot tables, because they can be actually really, really useful. Right, let me move on. The next set of data, we have got a column for units sold, one for total sales, and another for profit percentage. Let's imagine that we think that there is some sort of relationship between these three things. Now, if it was a relationship between two things, we could use a scatter chart, but because we've got three things, we can't. But what we can do is use a type of scatter chart called a bubble chart. What we do is select the data, go to Insert, off to the scatter chart section, and we choose bubble like that. And because that's quite big, let me adjust the sizes and make it look like that. There we go. Now, what we've got this time, we've got units sold along our horizontal axis, our total sales appearing along our vertical axis, but this time we've got the third measure for profit being displayed as the size of these bubbles. So we can see here that we've got the general pattern of going from this 0, 0 corner here, and they're both going upwards together, but also we've got the bubble sizes increasing as well. So we can see that the more units we sell, the more our total sales increase, and so does our profit percentage. Now, what happens if you have negative profit? Well, let me change the profit for that 90% to minus 90%. Watch what happens to the bubble. There we go, it disappears. So by default, any negative bubble sizes will just disappear. If you want to, though, you can show any negative bubbles by clicking on the data series, so a bubble, and then within your format pane, there's an option that says show negative bubbles like that. And you can see now that we have got this white bubble appearing there for our negative profit. Now, another useful type of chart we've got is a histogram. This is useful if you want to show ranges of things. So here we've got data where we've got a bunch of people's names, and we've also got what score they got in particular exams. If I wanted to display this data as, say, ranges, so we want to see how many people scored between 0 and 20, 20 to 40, that sort of thing, we can create a histogram by selecting the data, going to Insert, going up to the statistical section here and choosing histogram like that. Now, on the surface, the histogram looks a little bit like a bar chart, doesn't it? The difference, though, is that these are called bins, and you change their behaviour in a slightly different way. In order to change how they are displayed and how many you get, depending on your version of Excel, you either have to click on the bin itself, which brings you up to the Format Data Series option, and then go to the bin section there. But for other versions of Excel, you may need to click on the axis instead. So what I'd say is, if you use a histogram and you want to control what your bins are doing, try the data series. If there's nothing there that looks promising, go to the axis instead. But anyway, what we can see here is that I have got bins that are set to auto. What I can do is change the number of bins to be 5, like that. And we've now got 5 bins. And if you will notice down at the bottom, we've got some quite peculiar ranges, haven't we? We've got 5 to 24, 24 to 43, and they're really not what we're after. You can control what labels appear for these and how the ranges are constructed using the overflow bin and underflow bin options. For example, if I go to underflow bin and change this to 20, we get it changing to this. So we can now see that we've got that first bin that says less than or equal to 20, and we're then having bins of 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, and so on. So if you want to know how many people scored between 60 and 80, you can go up to the vertical axis for that, and we can see that there are 4 people within that particular bin. Right, the final sort of chart that we will look at then will be ones for this particular data. Now, we have got a column giving us months, we've then got a column giving us rainfall in millimetres, and then we've got a column showing us the number of rainy days. Now, what would be tempting for this data is for us to try putting it onto a column chart. So if I do that, and go to Insert and Column Chart like this, we get a chart that looks like so. Now this plots our blue columns showing us rainfall in millimetres. We've got orange columns showing us the number of rainy days. But the drawback with this is we've got different scales, haven't we? And that makes it very difficult for us to see the differences in the number of rainy days for each month. An alternative is to use a combination chart. So I select the data, I go to Insert, I go to the Combo section here, and I'm going to choose the second combination chart along. So it's where you've got a clustered column with a line on a secondary axis. When I select that, we get the chart looking like this. So this time we have got the columns relating to the rainfall in millimetres, and they use the column on the left. But then we've got the number of rainy days shown as a line, and that uses the axis over on the right. So they're pretty useful for showing different styles of chart on a single chart. What you will find if you are using Excel for Windows or different versions of Excel, you may have different options available for this, so you can fine-tune what is displayed on your combination chart. Right, I think with that then, I will stop sharing my screen again and go back to the slides. So, we've been looking at some of the less common types of chart. First of all, we've got the tree map and the Sunburst charts, which are pretty useful for data that's organised in some sort of a hierarchy. And we also took a very quick look at how you can use pivot charts for that situation as well. And remember, the pivot chart is a chart that's based on a pivot table. Next, we've got bubble charts, and think of this as being a scatter chart where you've got bubble size representing a third measure, so you can see how 3 things relate to each other, not just 2. Then we've got a histogram, which is a little bit like a column chart, but it's used for showing ranges. And then we've got the combination chart, which lets you combine 2 different chart types into a single chart. And you can set it up so that each data series can use a separate vertical axis. Now, at this point, I did have an exercise for you. Let me see, we've still got quite a bit to cover today, so I think actually I'm going to skip past this exercise. But what I would encourage you to do is to just try this out in your own time after the course is finished. You'll find the solutions available on the slides themselves, and you will also get access to the complete solutions workbook for the entire course as well. So with that, we've come to the end of looking at the less common types of charts that are available, and I think that we should have a break before going on to the next section. So what I'll do is bring up a 10-minute timer, and I will see you back here at about 39 minutes past the hour.